Greetings everyone, I'm Force of Nature from Top Tier Tips, and I'm welcoming you to your prime spot for tips and tricks to help you level up at Dead or Alive 5. Alright, in this session I'm going to be going over a bit of a beginner tutorial for those looking to learn how to use Ayane, or just to kind of like learn how she operates in kind of a relatively basic, not too complex ways. Alright, the first thing I'm going to go over is that just some kind of attributes of Ayane. Alright, Ayane is considered a Jill of all trades. What that means is that she's a well-rounded character that specializes in space control. Alright, what space control is just basically like control in space. And what that space control is known as is also zoning. Alright, so what that usually entails is essentially using the correct move at the right range. So it's like, obviously in close range you'll be using faster short range pokes, and when you're at a bit further out you'll be using slightly slower but longer ranged attacks. Alright, just to give you like a bit of a general breakdown of Ayane, I'll start off with just her general poking speeds from all three heights. Like the general kind of pokes you're going to be using, for instance, in close. Alright, for instance, you got your 10 frame jab, your P, your 13 frame 6P, you have a 13 frame mid kick 6K, and 12 frame low your 2P. If you want to like check the attributes of any of these moves, you could turn on the move details from the fight screen info. So jab 10 frames, 6P or your mid punch 13 frames, your knee 13 frames, I mean, which is 6K, and 2P. See, all the details are here if you need to. Check that stuff. Alright, so the kind of main key to using Ayane is, like I said earlier, is knowing what move to use at each range. A general rule of thumb is the closer you are, the faster the moves you're going to be focusing on. Where when you're further out, the focus now is on moves that have good range and don't really leave you really punishable or unsafe if they whiff, or if they, for instance, get blocked. Like basically a move that I use very often with Ayane is her 3H plus K. So the input's just down, forward, and H plus K. Alright, this move is quite good because it's a 19 frame move that can deal, well, has the capability to deal 26 damage on normal hit, and it's only -3 on block. Another kick that has full tracking capability. With this move, it's essentially considered like a frame trap on block, because with -3 you cannot be punished at all, and depending on what the opponent does, you can also even slightly well, it's called a bare, which is basically you can almost kind of disrespect their advantage if you know what they're doing. An example could be, so you can use a jab if you think they're going to do a slow mid, or if you think they're going to do a high, you can use like back turn 2P, a high crush like move. So just different stuff like that. But I'll just continue on now with just attacking at different ranges. Alright, you know of the general pokes. You know of the general pokes to do in close. But if you're a little further out, an option that I tend to recommend is her 3P. Alright, don't worry about the kind of moves on block, or the kind of because it is actually quite a lot of negative frames. But to make up for that, it has a very delayable follow-up, whether it be 3PP or 3PK. But generally, just you're going to be using 3P as your poke. Because if the opponent tries to punish it, where punishment in Dead or Alive 5, including last round, is generally in the form of a forward throw. Alright, you can check out any of my other tutorials just to get some idea, just to get kind of the specifications on specifics. Like most forward throws are 7 frames. But yeah, so with this thing, if they suspect you're going to free cancel in the air, they can try and throw you. But obviously, they have to respect your follow-up. So what they would be doing is punishing you on read. So in that case, you don't have to worry about it. So from just outside of close range, so around mid-range, 3P is a good go-to poke. If you do like to favor her forward punch, a tactic you can use in both close range and mid range is perform her 6P3 or 6P spin. What this does is it on block or on hit. Well, even though it works best if you end up hitting your opponent, especially if you can get a counter strike, because you will be at considerable frame advantage from that. But what it is by doing this, it ends up pressuring the opponent because it forces them to have to take some sort of action or make some sort of decision based on this. Although if you keep doing this on an opponent's block, technically what they could do is they could elbow you out of it. Like, you don't really want that to happen. See, if you're not careful. Although, what you can do, and this is where this tool can become quite handy, is you can easily free cancel into a guard. What that does is, it basically means you can't be punished for doing it. So you only get counter blown if you try and do something out of it. Alright, the main two attacks you have out of the 6B spin would be, she has her forward punch, then you can do kick, 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 or kick, kick, low kick, or you can go for mid punch. So it's basically a mix-up between a low kick or a mid punch. Alright, to take note, the low kick comes out slightly faster than the mid punch, although the mid punch is much more dangerous. But of course, generally I find because of that, most opponents tend to prioritize the low kick and may try to low hold it. So yeah, you don't really want that to happen to you. So obviously, what you have to try and do if you suspect someone is you have to end up stopping them from wanting to hold it by doing a low throw after. You get a huge amount of damage from that. That's 93 damage on high counter off of her back turn 2T. So that right there, that's so huge. It's a large amount of damage. All right. From just continuing on now from mid-range. Aside from, I tend to usually prioritize 3P, 6P3. Although after 6P3, the most common option you're going to do is just simply block. So you're using it almost like a bait. If you suspect the opponent won't try and interrupt you, intercept you, or counter hit you, then you could start going for an attack like the low kick. See, what this low kick is that's just off of the spin, it's just simply it's the same as back turn 3K or 3KK. I mean, you could do it up to 3 times. I mean, a neat little attribute of this is if the second kick connects, the third kick is guaranteed. But of course, a lot of people are gonna try and hold the second hit, so you might have to decide to just do a single strike. So if you want a bit of a low option from mid-range, you can use her from front facing. You could try her 3-3P. This one has a delayable follow-up in 3-3P 2K. I mean, 3-3P is technically fairly negative on. I can show you it's fairly negative on even normal hit, like it's a -4, but the follow-up can be delayed for a fairly large window, and the follow-up is +12 on normal hit or +18 on counter hit. So you obviously don't want to get hit by that low. So that's why you're probably not going to be retaliated that much for just doing 3P. If you want a mid-kick option from about mid-range, you could try 3K. And here's a decent poke. It actually has numerous follow-ups, but most of them are all pretty much highs. So I can recommend 3K or 3KK. You can actually go up to 4 times. Yeah, it goes mid-kick, then the rest are all highs, but you can also end off with a spin-in low kick that can provide a lot of advantage if it gets blocked. So you can use that to throw opponents off. Like the follow-ups are very, very delayable, so you can really throw someone off with it. But of course, after the first hit gets blocked, the opponent might try to high crush, like go under it with something like a 2P or something. So in that case, you can just do a single one, and just usually use the high to see if you think you can counter hit or intercept an opponent trying to attack after, say, blocking 3K. From mid-range, alright, so what do we have so far? So we have 3P, 6P, or 6P3, 3-3P, and another tactic you can also use is to simply use a jab from mid-range. And what you're using here is you're baiting a reaction. A common technique you could do is jab, then 4-4, or jab, and 8P. So back turn 8P will turn her back around. See, as you see, every time I do this, it creates space. So this is a very good space control tool. But you don't even have to do that. You can do that and like do something right after. If someone runs at you, if someone ends up like running at you, then you can end up counter hitting them for a juggle. Like this is I'm using here her back turn 6P after that, and this gets it's a 13 frame launcher essentially. Other stuff you can end up doing from mid-range is the attack I showed earlier, which, if you space it right, is a very potent tool. Remember her 3H plus K. Like this one can be used from mid-range. You can get like a juggle off it. Like this one reaches really far. Like I mean, if you become a move detail junkie like me, you can see this reaches around 2.22 or 2.23 meters. Like that's a lot of range. So with it being only -3 on block, dealing 32 damage on counter hit, and well, obviously it always is a combo starter, so it always causes a bound unless you end up hitting him in the back and just knocks him over. But here you can always get off a juggle if you can, but even though you have to be able to time it. Alright, for long range, well, essentially the longest range poke you're really going to be using with Ayane is her 3H plus K. Because right here, this is generally a very safe move to chuck out. The only thing to worry about is if the opponent spaces really well, you can get punished in the back, but But generally a tactic I can do with 3H plus K is a tactic I also do with her jab. It's 3H plus K, then 8P. See, this makes it a very potent space control tool. See, with this, it can make it really hard for close range opponents to get in on her. The only real risk of this move is if you don't necessarily space it right. Since it's a little on the slow side at 19 frames, you can get counter blown for throwing this move out if you do it too close. Because obviously most pokes are a lot faster than 19 frames. This doesn't only apply to Ayane, but this applies to most characters. If you're at long range, so basically like at one other side of the screen, the main focus is to try and get in on your opponent. One thing that makes kind of Ayane unique compared to most characters is that her gameplay allows her to play a very potent keep out game. So if you essentially don't have a life deficit, which is if you see right here, I have a lot less health than Kasumi. In this case, I'm eventually going to have to get in on her. Like if I'm the one with the life lead, then I just focus on just like keep out, which is making it hard for the opponent to get in on you. If you do have to get in, Ayane does have a unique tactic where you can press her 8P to move forward, then press guard, and this performs kind of like a pseudo dash. What it's doing is allowing you to transition between front facing and back facing, while allowing you to essentially in one way make use of both options. Like if you do end up, like for instance, when you go into back turn, a couple really nice pokes to use is her back turn 6K, which is, well, it's neutral on block or +1 if you can hit like right at the tip. Like I could like show you how good its frames are right now. Like right there, but I know it's usually hard to get it at tip range, but just getting a neutral is good also. Alright, with so that is one thing you can practice, like dashing in like that. Another option I said is the same thing with with their 6P. You can use their 6P3 guard. So basically it's kind of like just different ways to try to bait. Another thing of course is you can always just do like run up block or like run up jab. Like the point is just to be able, if you have to get in on your opponents, is just to use different ways. Like the main focus though is to find a way to get in without the opponent being able to intercept you or counter blow you. So like I'll say, if you're running at an opponent or if you're approaching them, you're generally going to be at disadvantage. So you're going to be having to do some sort of defensive action. Because your focus now, well, is mostly to get in, but you also have to kind of anticipate what the opponent may end up trying to do to you. So that is a thing to keep in mind. A poke you can also use even if you're not necessarily in close, but even at maybe a little bit of range, is you can like use her 2P. Like this move because it's 12 frames, it's really fast and will beat out a lot of things. Being a 2P, it's also a high crush, so it goes under high attacks. And Ayane's 2P reaches really far, well, almost 1.5 meters, like about, I think 1.46, 1.47. So with that range, you can use her 2P as like almost like a keep out tool. Like if to be able to kind of control space, you have to make use of both their close and back turn. So I'm using 8P, like I said earlier, to be able to transition. For back turn, you can also use like back turn 2K as a poke, even though if it does get blocked, it will be unsafe. So I mean that is stuff to end up looking out for. All right, when I end up recommend when you're learning Ayane, and one thing I see a lot of people do that, which I don't really like doing, and which I highly don't recommend, when you're using Ayane, try to avoid using her unsafe moves. I know they look flashy as hell and they look pretty cool, but don't do stuff like this. Like if you end up doing this move right here, you're at minus 30 on block. What that means is pretty much any character can almost do whatever the hell they want with you in terms of punishment. They could choose to do their biggest throw. They can usually go for a sit-down stun for a big combo. I mean, they can like do whatever. So this is her PPPK string. Like, don't use this on block. The only thing you ever use that for is just as a. The only thing you use that for is if you want like a really cheap juggle. Right here. I mean, if you need to like juggle your opponent or something, then yeah, you can use that. Even though for juggles, I only recommend that if you just want to get easy damage or anything. Like there are other options you can do after that, like your PP 6PK. Let me just take this off. Her PP 6K 2K, so you can use that as a juggle. And with that, it causes a splash knockdown where you can end up continuing pressure. If you are gonna practice anything on the ground, I can end up showing you what the and usually what I end up meaning by that. All it means is that you can get a 2H plus K when you hit them on the ground. So right now what you want to probably think about is how usually to initiate a stun, which is really important. Most attacks on counter hit do... Most hits on counter hit do stun, but there are some moves that also can stun on normal hit. Your most common one in close will be your 6K. This will give you plus 15 frame advantage, usually most times. What that means is you can follow up with an attack that is 13 frames or faster, because in DOA5 last round you have to add 2 extra frames to the frame data. So plus 15 needs to be followed up with a 13 frame move or faster. For Ayane, her 13 frame moves are her 6P, or you could do another 6K. Then you can wake them up with that. Another two other attacks that you can do to follow up: jab jab, P4P, which is actually a pretty neat string. Her P4P, I like this one. Or you could do KK. Although her KK or 5KK, it stuns on normal hit also, which actually could set up pretty good stun situations. But of course, a very common kind of counter hit you tend to get with Ayane is with her 6P. So if you counter hit with a 6P3, you get a pretty potent mix-up. You don't have to do necessarily the attacks I showed you. You don't necessarily have to do the attacks I showed you earlier. Like with this, what I mean is like with those two ones I show you, what you can do is you can free cancel into stuff. So you could do various things off of this if you score a counter hit. One of the nicest things about her 6P is that it can go under high jabs. So even though this move is 13 frames, it can beat out most the initial frames of jabs, so it generally just goes under them. And if you beat out a jab, you'll score a counter hit. As for things usually to practice with Ayane, a big thing I tend to recommend practicing with her is her kind of spacing and movement. So I already showed you her kind of dash you can do right there. If you want to kind of just create a little space, you can use her 1P plus K. Like right here you have her spin. What can even complement her spin is if you press, after the 1P plus K, you could press 4-4 and make even more space. Oh, and also, if you just want to get away, or if you need to like kind of create even more space, you can use her 7p. So it leaves her back turn, but this right here can, if you can get away, you can create like a lot of space with her 7p. As a neat tactic also, you can like use her 6p. Maybe just take off the counter hit. You could use her 6p to kind of jump over. This is 6p 9. Although be careful, if you do jump over the opponent and they block it, for instance, then you will be at disadvantage on the way down and they can poke you first, so that is one thing to watch out for. But this is mostly just used for, well, in certain situations you might want to avoid like a low retaliation, but the general reason is also, I usually just use it as for like repositioning. Because obviously, like with Ayane, you want her to be in the right place at the right time. Although I will continue on with like what I said earlier, is that there are some moves I want you to watch out for. I already showed you her PPPK. Like these are basically moves I want you to pretty much not use from neutral. Like a lot of people love to use her back roll. I say pretty much keep that used to a minimum. Whenever I do it, I usually just free cancel into a block unless I know they're gonna try and counter hit me, because the attacks out of here are very risky. A very common thing I see people do is use her back roll flip. This move isn't an offensive hold or a catch throw. It's just a standard. It's a standard specialty throw. So that means if the opponent does any strike at all, then you'll be high counter blowing. With this attack here, this move is incredibly unsafe on block also. Like minus 29, and your left back turn, so the opponent can fully strike punish you if it gets blocked. So you have to be very careful with doing that. With doing this throw, it's just simply very reactable, especially if you do it in like a really predictable way. Because if an opponent sees you doing a roll-in, they could generally just do a fast low crush move like right away to beat you out. So you have to be careful with that. There are some other like unsafe moves also. It's like be careful with this move also. It's only minus 12 on block, but I see a lot of Ayane players just like to chuck this out thinking it's like it's a power move or something. Like don't throw out this move from random or from neutral. Only do this if you're certain you're going to either intercept something or if you're trying to whiff punish. Or you can also do it after in certain situations where it's like guaranteed. But from neutral, like don't use that move. Another one also is her 4H plus K. This move is minus 17 on block. It has pretty good hit statuses when it actually hits, like you can get a limbo stun or a crumple stun. But on block it can be really unsafe. But yeah, it could set up a gut status. But other than that, like don't throw this move out from neutral. Instead, during stun, kind of moves that you could end up doing depending on how big the stun is. You have to take note whether Ayane's front facing or back turn facing. The best stuns in Dead or Alive last round are called lift stuns, when you see the opponent kind of bounce up. Although with Ayane it's a little tricky to kind of set them up because she doesn't really have really easily access to lift stuns, because she's more of like kind of a like you kind of just do a little stun then you can like launch after it. But if you, for instance, if you're stunned with like KK for instance, then you can usually get pretty good follow-ups after this. So, a common attack you might stun the opponent with, this is another one I want you to be careful with, is her forward kick 4 or 6 KK4. Like it provides a good stun on either normal hit or counter hit. So if you end up doing this, Ayane's back turn, so you have to do you're going to be doing a back turn mix-up afterwards. So for here, you can end up doing, like, you can just think about doing like what follow-ups you could do on like any height. So at a high, you can use like her jab or her back turn H plus K. Like for instance, if you end up doing that, H plus K, you may see the red stun, which means you can attempt to try a critical burst. Although, of course, you have to be careful that critical bursts can be held, so in that case, you may have to go for like a follow-up. I mean, a mix-up. Like, just try like something else. Other options, because you can end up just going for like a back turn like 2P, 4P plus KP. So there's various options you can do. And if you think they're gonna hold or anything like that, then you can go for her back turn throw. So you may have to experiment around. Like 3P also stuns. 3P also stuns quite well on normal hit. Anyways, I'll just finish this off by showing like you some combos that you could do with Ayane. Like if you end up hitting with a KK, you can end up launching with her 4P plus K. Alright, this what the juggle I ended up doing, what this didn't end up show, so it was KK, 4P plus K, then after 4P plus K is back turn 6P, 8KK, then from back turn PP, see, so back turn PP4, PP, then 7K, so just this. You can also perform it with 8K also, so yeah, there's one combo. Another thing you can do is, even though this can be a bit trickier, is off 3H plus K. Again, I'm doing a drill kick. Or what this juggle I'm doing here is with 3H plus K, dash dash guard, then another dash dash into 66KK4, then just 7K. This one does take quite a bit of practice to get down effectively. There's another you can also end off with. If once you get really the hang of it, you can finish off with different things like that, but yeah, it is a pretty challenging combo. Here, off of her throw, her 6-4T, you can end up just doing 6PP, 66KK4, then 4P, then 4PK. Like it's not really that hard to juggle, and it gets good damage at about 76 points. There is a variation to that you can do, which is instead of going for the usual after 66KK4, instead of going for 4PK, what you end up doing instead is doing you hold down guard, then press 4K. What this does is it turns her around. Then while holding guard, you can press 6K, 2K, you get the same ground splat that allows you to get the 2H plus K on the grounded opponent. I'll show you some other combos you can also try. Here, off of 4K, 4P plus K, back turn PP 6P, then the same PP 4, PP 7K. Or a variation is just 4K, 4P, PP, and here. If you do wall slam an opponent, use PP 6PK as your wall juggle. under most situations, that's what you do. If you wall slam with something that leaves with back turn, use the same back turn PP for PP7K. Or you can do back turn PP6P, then delay K, like this. Anyways, that's just it for now. Alright, just a bit of a recap. The main focus I want you to have with Ayane is learning how to control space safely. One of Ayane's biggest weaknesses is that if you don't know how to properly utilize her pokes, then she can become really unsafe and can get punished really hard for making mistakes. So I'll show you. Don't do PPPK, 4H plus K, any back roll nonsense. Don't do drill kick freely. Although with that one, you have to be a little certain of what you're doing and be careful with these. Like with these moves, you generally want to be certain that you're whip punishing something. But if you want a safe option, use 3H plus K. Because this one, even if you whiff or if it hits, there's very little risk to that move. So I recommend that one. The kind of things to watch out for with Ayane is there's some characters that she might have a bit of a challenge with. Not that she necessarily has not necessarily that she has a lot of trouble, but what I want you to do is be careful of characters that have good ranged games. Basically, opponents where Ayane won't have a range advantage against them, or the range game is fairly equal between characters. Like some of the other ninjas, for instance, also can have pretty good range games. Well, aside from Kasumi, who's mostly close range, and there's also characters also well, mainly kind of Hayabusa, Hayate, those kind of characters you have to be careful of, characters with good range. Another thing also to be careful is if the opponent is being very patient, then that means you have to, well, you have to try and find ways to open them up. If the opponent's just standing there blocking, generally a good thing you can do is you can just 2P them. Ayane's 2P is 0 on hit. So what that means is that it keeps the frames at neutral. You can kind of it's a pressure tool, so you can, it's a real low, so you can do it to open them up. Another thing you can do on someone's block is jab. See, with jab, you can kind of condition them to do something, because you can do P4, P, back turn 2P, PP, P, back turn 6P. I mean, there's various things that you can do. Another thing also is if you think they're going to push a button right away, of course, you can do P4P, because of course one of the most dangerous things that Ayane can do in close is jab throw. She is probably the best jab throw in the game. It's like that. See, really, really good. But yeah, of course, if they're just standing there blocking, you can use her most dangerous throw and open them up for solid damage. You can even do mix-ups off it if you wanted to. Right there, that's her other 12-frame throw, so good damage. But yeah, so that's the main things to look out for is if you need to get your offense started, look at ways to open up your opponent. But in general, a thing that Ayane does really well is making it hard at opponents to approach her. Because her space control is just really... Her space control is really good. Yeah, so mainly just kind of focus on poking safely. What you can't really do is get in someone's face and just mash buttons with Ayane, because that's not really how you're supposed to play the character. I mean, if you do that, you might as well just end up playing a much safer rushdown character. Like a character like Kokoro might be a little bit more suited for in-your-face style, but with Ayane, your main goal is to try and be at a range that you feel comfortable at, that makes it hard for the opponent to get in or get their offense started on you. Anyways, that's it for now. So thank you for watching my Ayane tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe and rate, and subscribe, and don't forget to also leave a comment down below about if you have any questions about anything. Feel free to message me on Free Step Dodge, or even just to free step me on my YouTube about anything. But anyways, this is Force of Nature signing off, and I'll see you next time on Top Tier Tips.